I'll tell you about it later. Okay, let's see. It is 8:45. Should we actually start on time? I think the people here on time want to start on time, right? Let's do it.
It's up to you. You're the rabbi.
It's up to me. Everything's up to me.
Yes.
Nothing is up to me. Nothing.
Only a rabbit says so.
Hi, Kafira. Hi, Amy. Good to see you. Asher Chaim. When other people are ready, I'd love to see your beautiful faces. If you need to stay off camera, that's okay. Hi, Diana. Good to see you. Wow. Lovely. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Abigail. Great. Thank you for turning your cameras on. It makes a difference for us, I think, to see faces as opposed to dark boxes, if you know what I mean.
I do, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I wish I could turn on my camera.
People are coming in fast and furious. Sharon Dolan got here early. I love it.
Been here before.
You've never
Always
been here
on
before?
Zoom.
No.
The dog's not here, so I can be here.
Where's the dog had
It's
a,
upstate.
an
on
overnight?
the way.
You have to throw a kiddush, I think, right? Is there?
God. Oh my God, Sharon Dolan's here in person. This is cause for celebration.
Ours are right up.
Hardly. No, I'm happy. Okay, let's do the bracha over Torah study. In cacophony, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, sacred source of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to soak in your sacred wisdom. We have a juicy parsha this week, right? The Shalach. I mean, Shalach, not B'Shalach. Shalach is a different parsha. And it's the wonderful and endlessly interesting story of the spies scouting out the land of Canaan. And what I'd like to do with you today is first, like really getting into some structural analysis. It'll be a little intense. And hopefully you'll hang on with me. And then we will go on to figure out like what are the components of courage, and see if the Torah can tell us. And I talked about that last night, but we're going to do a deeper dive into close readings of the text. Okay, so let's see if I can share my screen. No, good. Hold on. Here we go. How's that? I called it courage in the face of dark whispers. Dibat ha'aretz. So dibat is the word that's used for how the spies talk about the promised land. Okay. And there are only two occurrences in the whole Torah of the word dibat, which is pretty amazing. Right? When there are only two occurrences, you know it's instructive. So what does diba mean? Whispering, defamation, evil report. So I called it here in the title Dark Whispers or Whispers of Destruction. Hello. So good to see you, Tamas. I haven't seen you in a while. I just did this. To that. But the point so far is there are only two occurrences of this very strange word, which has to do with whispering and evil and defamation. So where are the two occurrences? That's where we're going next. The first one is in Genesis, and it's in the story of, the beginning of the story of Joseph, which we know in chapter 37 is a story of, sibling rivalry and violence and selling Joseph into slavery and lots of horrors and a family split and also going into exile, right? The beginning of going into Egypt, right? Joseph is the first one of the family who goes into Egypt. And really the beginning, one could say, of our slavery story. So let's look at and see what happens in Genesis 37, and then we'll go to our Parsha and look at that occurrence of Dibah.
Is that Diva from the bar?
No,
Because it's still talking.
it is still talking. It's not connected.
Uh-huh.
As far as I know, I'm going to ask our Asher Chaim's laughing. I'm going to ask our resident grammarian.
Okay, often we have taken words in which 2 out of the 3 root letters are identical and said they're not the same word, but perhaps they have some connection.
Yeah.
So the fact that Daled Bet Hey and Daled Bet Resh have 2 out of 3, maybe there was some Proto-Semitic 2-letter root. So they
Ooh, I
have, they're
love that answer.
cousins.
Proto-Semitic common root. But in Hebrew, they have different roots. They mean different things, but Asher Chaim is right. Maybe they're related. I should have not said no so quickly.
They're,
I was so
they're
excited to say
cousins.
no.
They're cousins. They're not conjoined twins.
They're cousins. Okay.
No is the cousin of maybe.
No is the cousin of maybe. Maybe is actually a more interesting word generally. Sometimes no is interesting. Okay, so let's, we digress. All right, so let's see what happens in Genesis 37. So we start with Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz. Sorry, let me just make this a little bigger for my Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Migurei Aviv Be'eretz Canaan. So we start off with Jacob settling, a sense of settling, but immediately a polarity is set up between settling and settling in the land where his father wandered, right, in Eretz Canaan. Now, the rabbis see settling as a sign of something bad. Like as soon as you're settled and you think you're okay, right? Okay, I got it made, I fixed everything up, I have enough money, I'm going to retire, something bad happens, right? And something actually horrible happens in this parsha. So there's a settling, but that settling is undone. Okay. Eila Toldot Yaakov. And then the next thing we know is we hear an introduction to the genealogy of Jacob, but then there's no genealogy, which is really strange. Eila Toldot Yaakov. Yosef ben Shva Esrei Shana. This is the line of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph, like, what do you mean? Like, what's going on here? Why are you telling us about one child when you introduce this with, this is the line of Jacob? And those words, Eila Toldot, are typical, is typical introduction to a genealogy. Okay, so Joseph is 17 years old. Haya ro'eh et achav batzon. He was a shepherd with his brothers or for his brothers in their sheep. It's the grammar is a little weird. V'hu na'ar et b'nei bilha, et b'nei zilpah. So he's kind of assisting or apprenticing to the sons of his father's handmaidens, Bilha and Zilpah, Nishei Aviv, the wives of his father. Vayaveh Yosef dibatam ra'a el avihem. So he brought this evil report, that word, dibah, the whispers of destruction, right, to their father. So, first we have this sense of settling, we have a genealogy, and then immediately there's this huge disruption, right? That sense of being settled is immediately disrupted. And then we have this bad intent on the part of Joseph. And this word ro'eh et achav, did you read it?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second, let me just finish the sentence. This word for ro'eh et achav, there's a play on this word shepherding throughout the story, with kind of being overshadowed by the connotation of ra'ah, ro'eh, ra'ah. Okay, shepherd, evil. So is Joseph a ro'eh et achav, or is he evil with his brothers? Okay, Sharon Dolan.
Well,
Then Asher Chaim.
it's not clear to me in this first usage that dibatam
Uh-huh.
by itself is bad, because it needs to have ra'ah.
It has to, it's qualified.
So it, I'm wondering if over time, because of that association, it took on the negative connotation, because here it feels like it could be any kind of.
Well, that's a good question. So maybe it's just a report. But since there are only 2 occurrences of it in the Torah, and since both of them have to do with defamation, then I'm going to go with diba having negative associations. But you're right. Then why not just dibatan? Good question. Don't know the answer. Asher Chaim.
Just pointing out with a smile that when you hear ra in ro'eh, it's like someone hearing daber in diba.
Ha! But not exactly, because they're the exact same letters. Okay, Asher Chaim. I'll go with that. Okay, so we are on verse 3. Yisrael ahavet Yosef mikol banav. Israel loved Joseph best of all his sons. So we have this defamation. We have this interesting setup of Joseph and the rest of his brothers. So he's somehow set apart. And then the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, which are like the second-class citizens because it's not Rachel and Leah. And then we have thrown into that sort of minefield is the fire of Israel, or Jacob, loving Joseph more than all the rest of his brothers. Ouch. Because he was a child of his old age. And he had made him an ornamented tunic. Okay, so that's the only background for Diba we have before this parsha, before the parsha we're in, which is Shlach. Now let's look at the second use of Diba. And it's interesting, Sharon, you'll see it's not qualified here.
Right. I understand that, but in that first, you
You're
wonder
right.
if it took on that quality from the association with Ra.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so here in this context, the people are freaking out because 10 of the spies said, we went to the land of Canaan, we went to the promised land, it's a land flowing with milk and honey, but there are these giants there, and Amalek is there, and we can't conquer it, we can't do it. And they said that in front of Moshe and Aaron and all the people. And so the people are freaking out, and Caleb is trying to calm them down. So Caleb hushed the people by Has Caleb et ha'am el Moshe. Hushed the people before Moses and said, let us by all means go up. Vayomer, alo na'aleh. Right? Let's rise up, rise. V'yarashnu otah, and we shall inherit it or gain possession of it. Because we can. There's a doubling there of we can. And the other 10 spies that went with Caleb said, Lo nuchal la, we can't, rise up, El Ha'am, upon the nation, because it's stronger than we are. Here's the diba word. Yatziu dibat haaretz. They spread calumnies or defamed the land. Asher taru ota el bnei Yisrael. They defamed the land that they scouted out to the children of Israel, saying, Lemor, ha'aretz asher avarnu va latur ota. The land that we passed over to scout it out, Eretz ochelet yoshveha. It's a land, Eretz ochelet yoshveha hi. It's a land that consumes its inhabitants, not a land of safety, right? V'chol ha'am asher ra'inu b'tocha anshe midot. And all the people that we saw in it are of great size, great measurements. Okay, so it's a stark comparison here, a direct comparison between people who feel like they can and people who feel like they can't, right? It's exactly the opposite. And we're going to look later on and see what accounts for that difference. See if we, that's what I tried to do last night in my sermon. See if we can figure out the secret sauce to the sense that I can, right? To courage, right? What enables us to be courageous? So that's, just to be transparent. That's what I want to do with you today is figure that out. V'sham ra'inu et ha-nephilim, and we saw the nephilim there, the big guys. B'nei Anak, the children of Anak, also the big guys. Giants, there must be differences in these different scary people, but I don't know what they are. B'nei Anak min ha-nephilim, who are also from the nephilim. Oh, nephilim also means, could be related, Batya, to fallen. And I think the Midrash has a little party with that. V'nehi, this is important. V'nehi b'einenu k'chagavim. And we look like grasshoppers to ourselves. V'chen hayinu b'eineihem. And so we must have looked to them. So this is really interesting. The Torah is telling us what their self-concept was. I can't think of another occurrence, I don't know if anyone else can, where the Torah tells us what someone looked like in their own eyes. It's fascinating. We see proud or, scared, but, this is how I felt about myself. That's really interesting.
Maybe my brother's keeper would be a coincidence.
Am I my brother's keeper?
Do you think that
Well, that's about what my role is, as opposed to what I look like to myself. It's a little bit different.
Right, but you see me as X, but I see myself
Yes,
as Y.
that's true.
A little bit.
That's true. Nice. Asher Chaim has his hand.
When Jacob says to God, Katonti, I feel small and insignificant, in the presence of God, it's appropriate.
Yes. But he says katonti, but this is so direct in terms of how I look to myself. It's very intimate. How we look to ourselves. Like, think about that. And it feels like it smacks of modernity, but here it is in this ancient text. Okay. So I'm going to go into that as well, like what had them look like grasshoppers to themselves. Okay, so now I want to do a little structural comparison between the two stories. You can hang on because it's really interesting. So I learned this from, this is a website called Aleph Beta. And it's the lead rabbi, the lead teacher is Rabbi David Foreman, and there are all kinds of interesting teachers. And they do really fascinating literary work with the Torah. So if you're ever interested in listening, so I got this comparison from there, and I wanted to share it with you, and I have a link below if you'd like to listen yourself. So I'm not going to go into every single thing here. I just want to take you through it. So both in Genesis 37 and here, the plot lines derailed, right? Suddenly, because of Genesis 37, Joseph and the brothers end up in Egypt, right? There's like a sharp turn, and it's really in contrast with the fact that Jacob settled. So you expect one thing and you get another thing entirely. Here, right, what's the punishment for this? The people are going to wander around in the desert for 40 years, and this whole generation is going to die out. Plot line derailed, right? So, the consequences of both these stories are huge. Okay, so there's Diba in one story, Diba in the other. In both, there's a reporting back and a showing, right? So and also the sense of go and see. So in Genesis 37, Jacob says, to Joseph, Vayomer lo lech na re'eh et shlom achecha. Go, he says to Joseph, go and see the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the sheep, and bring me back davar, report back to me. And then in Numbers 13, the story, I don't have it here, but the story starts with Moshe saying, go scout out the land and report back. And they both come back with something to show. So in Numbers 13, Vayavo ad nachal eshkol v'yichrutu misham zmora ve'eshkol anavim echad v'yisa'uhu bamot b'tnayim u'min harimonim u'min ha'te'enim. They reached the Wadi Eshkol, and there they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes. It had to be borne on a carrying frame by two of them, and some pomegranates and figs. So this is sort of like the mythic fruits of the land, right? These grapes were so heavy, it had to be carried by two people. Amazing, which is, further testimony to this is a land flowing with milk and honey. This is a land of abundance, just as God promised. And then in Genesis 37, what do they bring back to Jacob? They bring back Joseph's tunics, right? Dipped in blood, right? It's a tragic presentation. And then in Numbers 13, I have this reversed, but they make a report to Moshe and the community. Okay, so think also about this structurally. In both stories, there are 2 and 10. In the story of Joseph, there's Judah and Reuben, who both want not to kill their brother, to do something else, sell him to slavery, rescue him. And then in Numbers 13, in Shlach, there's Joshua and Caleb and the rest of the tribal leaders. And in both stories, there's tremendous grief, right? In Genesis 37, we have that incredible moment of Jacob mourning for his son. Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and observed mourning for his son many days. And really, he didn't get over it, right, until he re-encountered his son. Let me just finish this little chart. And then the grief in Numbers 14 is Yehoshua ben Nun and Caleb ben Yefunah min hatarim et haaretz karu bigdehem. Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Yefunah, of those who had scattered land, rent their clothes. And then later, when the people hear the punishment, they also grieve. Right? That same word, vayit abel, is used. So you see this really fascinating structural parallels between the two stories. And, what's going on here? Like, why would this story in some way be replayed here? And I think at least in part what's going on is, like, the primary, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, the primary sort of factor in the book of Genesis is the creation of the Israelite family. Right? And in Genesis, it's all about sibling rivalry and ultimately, the violent split of this family. And then in Numbers, it's all about wandering in the wilderness and looking forward to the land. So in each case, the tragedy happens related to the ultimate goal of the book. Right? It's played out, like the literary structure is similar, but played out with a different theme and different actors. Does that make sense? A little structural analysis here. Yeah? Okay, let me stop sharing and take questions and comments before I go on. Sharon, you have something, and then Rob.
This may seem far-fetched and it's bringing in a third analogy, but I keep thinking of Fellow, who also has. This is like the 10 spies, the literal tall tales, right? The giants. And there's a way in which, in Othello's case, he's all puffed up with himself and he tells Desdemona these stories about the men with their heads below their shoulders and all these fantastical tales, and then he's brought down by that handkerchief. It's the ocular proof, and they're brought down by the again. It feels like it's some distortion, perversion of the instructions after the Shema to not go after what your eyes
Yeah, we're gonna
see,
get into
so
that.
that it seems like the deception is really all in the visual, the ocular proof that because of Joseph's tunic with blood, therefore he must be dead, and that's the wrong conclusion.
Not only is that the wrong conclusion, but the brothers bring the bloody coat to their father. Who supplies the lie? It's the father. He could have said, what did you do to my son? Instead, he said, a wild animal. Chaya ra'ah. Again, there's that word ra'ah, which, again, Ro and ra'ah are playing throughout the story, a kind of ironic play on terms. And, Jacob is the one who sort of tells that lie, tells that story, instead of assigning blame and responsibility where it belongs. Yeah, okay, anything else? Rob?
Both stories to me,
But I just want to make sure, do people online, can you hear what's in the room? Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you, Diane.
both stories to me is a problem of leadership. Yaakov made a blunder by treating Joseph favorably. That caused all the problems. And this happened with the tribes, with the spies after Sinai, which means Moshe screwed up because where's the faith? Where's the belief? Where you just witnessed Sinai, the greatest event in Jewish history, and they're
Why are you
worried.
blaming that on Moshe?
Because what a leader has to do, first of all, these were not just regular people, these were the princes of Egypt. They had no faith. I mean, you just came out of Sinai. Like, what, really? You should be able to march into hell and back. Nothing.
That's the struggle. That's the whole
But
wilderness
that's
experience
leadership.
struggle.
That's what
Okay.
leadership does.
I hear you, okay.
But some
Okay.
people think that they've used up the miracles, right? It's just one amazing miracle, and therefore everything after is
That's what you're gonna see.
Right.
I'm waiting to see one.
Okay, hold on.
Amen to that.
Amy and then Beth. Thank you so much.
No, just this part about, in their quest for freedom, they wandered in the desert and died in the desert. Your point about, your motive about us finding courage in these stories, I know personally for myself and so many that are in their quest for freedom did not find instant freedom and had to wander for long periods of time. And just reading this, and that I'm alive and reading this, gives me courage that it doesn't have to go that way. It didn't have to go that way. It could have been that I didn't make it or in the story, and I did, and that gives me courage.
Beautiful. So we are the ones that survived the story,
Yeah.
right? We're the ones who somehow live to tell the story.
Right.
All right, Ben,
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So I'm going to say a couple of one sort of more half-baked thing, just because it feels like the time to say it.
Okay, good.
Which is that I was really struck by this line, the way you translated it, which is a land that consumes its inhabitants.
Yeah.
And I think it's particularly interesting to me, first of all, because the Nephilim and these other reported people are there, but they're not consumed, right? And then you're also
Oh,
bringing...
you mean they weren't consumed when they went to spy out the land? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is like, you translate it as its inhabitants, but the question is, who are the inhabitants?
Yes.
Right? The idea is that if the Israelites go there, that they will be consumed, right? That is the
That is their
that is
assumption.
that
Of the
is
10
the
spies.
dibah. The dibah is
Yes,
that they will
correct.
be consumed.
Correct.
That is the essence of the dibah.
Correct.
And so, but there are inhabitants in the land now, right? So just this phrasing is like that the land itself is consuming them.
Oh, I
or
see, but those inhabitants are not consumed.
those inhabitants are not consumed, but also you could see it as a metaphorical consumption where it's like the society is consuming them. So like their society is so rotten, or their level of animosity or whatever it is, there's something about this, the people plus this land
Oh, that's really
that
interesting.
is consuming people, that is a force for entropy.
I see. So if
Um,
they step in, they're gonna be sucked into
Yeah, they're
that.
gonna be sucked in,
So let
right?
me just say one more thing about what you're saying. So when they say, yes, it's Eretz Chalav and, Zavat Chalav and Dvash, right, it's flowing with milk and honey. That's true, but that's nature.
Exactly.
That's not about the culture.
Exactly, the culture.
Really
right.
interesting.
So what I'm struck by is also that is the fear. The fear is that they will be consumed by this place. But ultimately, they are consumed by the wilderness. So ultimately, they are in like the land that actually, because of this frozenness, right? This unwillingness to go and be brave and to go into this land. Ultimately, this happens to them where they are. Ultimately, that the land that consumes them is the land where they are.
That's exactly right.
And-
And not only that, they form a little movement to go back to Egypt,
Right.
which is a trope, right, in the wilderness.
Right.
Let's
And
go backwards.
So, and then the other point that I would,
That was a half-baked one.
That was the half-baked
That
one.
one was good.
and
Let's
then,
see the fully baked.
For half-baked, pretty good.
Yeah,
Keep going, you're on a roll.
half-baked, excellent. Okay, keep going.
okay, I mean, the other point is also half-baked, so maybe two halves make a whole, I don't know, is that this 2 and 10 really resonates with me as the number of people who are on a jury. And also 12 is a very important number in the Torah in general. And so I'm thinking that when you're a one dissenter on the jury, right, out of 12, you need consensus of all 12, right, in order to condemn someone as a criminal. And so when you have that one dissenter, it's sometimes that one holdout can be swallowed up by the majority, right? But in this case, there are two. There are two dissenters who are in agreement in both cases, in both narratives. And
two people make for the legal definition of witnesses.
of witnesses, right, exactly. So when you have two
That's really.
against 10, you have a hung jury. You cannot go forward. So you have the majority that's in agreement, and you have these two dissenters in the minority that are in agreement, and you're stuck. And so the people are stuck.
Beautiful. The other thing I want to say, which is not directly related, but I just remembered it, that this story, if I'm remembering correctly, is the legal source for minyan, for 10 people
Right.
being minyan.
Right.
It's kind of counter testimony to the spies.
What we Americans call minyan.
Did you want to say something, Tony? Your hand is up. Yeah.
First of all, when Amy says we have or implies we all, so what I heard from Amy is we all have our stories that make it hard for us to be fully brave. And I'm thinking of the originator of, in a sense, of, aside from Hashem, of the 3 Western religions, Father Abraham, who underwent 10 wild tests to,
In the Midrash, yes.
in the
This is
Midrash.
not, yeah.
Well, he certainly went through one, at least a few even beyond the Midrash in the Bible itself, like the first and the last.
I'm just saying that the Midrash identifies 10,
Okay.
and they point to biblical
Great,
texts
okay.
in order to do so.
So one point I wanted to make, or just remind everyone, including myself, is we all have stories like Abraham that in our own way are in some rightly seen are scriptural, that we're all living scriptures. And we all have
We're all living Torahs.
we're all living Torahs who are, on the one hand, amateur humans, on the other hand, the Abrahams and Sarahs of our day. That's number one. Number two, swallowed up. When we talk about swallowed up by the wilderness or anything else, from a non-dualistic Jubu perspective, as in what's the sound of one hand clapping, maybe the wilderness that swallows us up is the same thing as the one love that wants to swallow us up. And by the way, will swallow us up sooner.
So just
And
to
so willingness.
play with what you're saying, so if you resist that sort of being swallowed up by the whole, it feels like hell.
Yeah,
But if you
that's our
don't
own,
resist it, it feels like love.
like heavenly love, as in
Beautiful.
the magical mystery tour is dying to take you away. And we resisted almost every step of the way, amateur humans.
I have to go back and listen to that song. Okay, all right, excellent. Is that a hand? Oh. Okay, Oswaldo, anyone online want to speak? How are we doing online? Okay, Oswaldo, and then back to the text.
Very quick, and I'll just want to follow up on Robert's statement of leadership. Just, I don't know if it's, I mean, this is obviously historical, but in current armies, I don't know what's happening right now in Israel, but in current armies, which I used to do is a scout doesn't interpret what they see. They just go, they look at it. And
which army?
U.S. But in general, I mean, this is general.
They just go and see. And
they just go see. Look, a guy was 5 meters tall, whatever. He weighed 300 pounds, whatever. They don't interpret because of the issue of the prejudice, because of issues of you bring in your own stuff, and they just see it, make observations, just measure as much as you can, and then report it back. And that's all you do.
See, I would say all seeing is interpretation.
That's true too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even identifying that man and which features you're describing is already a choice. But I agree. There's less adorned observation and more adorned,
Right.
more obviously interpreted. I agree with that. Okay, let's go on. I know otherwise Joe's going to come with you. Okay, so we're going to skip the next text because we basically looked at it earlier. I wanted to bring it back, and we're going to go into the question of grasshopper, the sense of being a grasshopper. So look at, oh, I have to share my screen. What?
I know.
Okay, here we go. Okay, why isn't that appearing there? Ah, there it is. Okay, so we're skipping number 4. We're in the section that is called can and can't. Okay, so we looked at this. And we're looking at the whole question of grasshoppers. So Rashi says, V'chen hayinu be'einehem, and so we must have been in their eyes. How did they know? That's what's bothering Rashi. Why would they say that? Sham'anu omrim ze lazen nimalin yesh b'kramim ka'an Hashem. We heard them say to one another, there are ants in the vineyards that look like human beings. So they overheard that. But we know that we all make assumptions about how other people are judging us, right? That happens all the time. I think that you think this about me. Or like I give a sermon and I think it's terrible and everybody must be judging me. Right? It's true, right? Sharon's saying yes. Now look at Midrash Tanhuma. Love this Midrash. Amru v'nehi be'einenu kachagavim, and in our own eyes we were like grasshopper. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be they, said, V'tarti aleha. It's not a direct translation. I don't know. Ella v'chein hayinu be'einehim. Oh, it's like, oh, okay. I can forgive them for that remark, but I was exacting when they said, Ella v'chein hayinu be'einehim makpidani. I'm exacting about that. Why? So we were in their eyes. Who would say that you were not like angels in their eyes? V'chiyotim hayitem. Oh, this is all cut off in the Hebrew, I'm sorry. Angels in their eyes, do you know what I made you in their eyes? In other words, we're not in charge of the judgments of others. We don't know what people, we never know what people are. We can only, watch is making eyes at me. We can only assume what other people, but we don't know, right? It's like we're traveling blind in this sort of field of impression management. Right, we're
But it's
totally
even
traveling.
worse than that, because even like Father Abraham.
Did you raise your hand?
I did.
I didn't see it. Did I call you? Go ahead, raise your hand. Go ahead, Tony.
Even somebody wildly intuitively in tune, like Father Abraham, the aforementioned, who gets 99 out of 100 intuitions correct because he is Father Abraham, after all, really misses the boat, in my opinion, when he thinks he hears that he's supposed to sacrifice Isaac.
So we all misinterpret. But it's all a matter of what you see and what you hear. And
Yep.
I think for me, here I am, like, you know, in the advanced age I am, I finally get that what I think is not the whole story.
Oof.
It's an amazing corrective.
Oof.
It's like, I think this, but what is it that I'm not thinking?
Mm.
What is it I'm like blind to? And that question helps me a lot. And I will say here that because of that, I am very suspicious of people who are very sure of themselves.
Yes.
And very sure of their opinions without realizing, I mean, this is my bias, I'm sharing my bias, because life is bigger than our opinions. It's just much bigger.
Or even our very clear intuitions, which we think are bigger and better.
Well, that's tricky. So that's tricky. So when do we have a sense that we're channeling something that's really important? And when do we trust that? And when are we skeptical of what we're thinking and knowing? And how do we know it? So it's a really complicated game, and we're going to go on. But yes, this whole parsha is about what kind of eyes are you seeing with? And what are the assumptions that allow you to see what you see and not see what you don't see? Okay, so we're going to get into that now, I think. Okay, so this passage is really tricky, and I named this in my sermon last night, but I'll tell you why. Asher Chaim, do you feel like reading? I'm getting a little tired.
Absolutely. Thank you for the honor.
Number 7.
V'Yehoshua bin Nun v'Chalev ben Yefuneh min hatarim et haaretz kir'u bigdehem. But Yehoshua son of Nun and Kalev son of Yefuneh, of those who had scouted the land, tore their garments.
So
Vayomru
they
el
the
kol
garments
adat
at hearing what, what the other spies were saying.
Vayomru el kol adat b'nei Yisrael lemor, and they said to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, saying, Haaretz asher avarnu bah laturota, tova haaretz me'od me'od. The land which we passed through to scout it out, the land is good, extremely, extremely. Im hafez banu Adonai, v'hevi otanu el haaretz hazot, untanach lanu, if Yud He Vav He finds favor in us and brings us to this land and gives it to us, Eretz asher hi zavat halav udvash, a land which oozes milk and honey. Ach badonai al timrodu. Ach, however, forcefully, against Yud He Vav He you must not rebel. V'atem al tir'u et am haaretz ki lachmeinu heim. And you, don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are our food, they're consumable, they're toast. Sar tzilam me'alehem v'Adonai itanu al tiraun. If the shadow is removed from them, and Yud He Vav He is with us, do not be afraid of them. parallel to the manna, their food, where if the shade passed away in the sun, it dissolved. So they're going to dissolve. Vayomru kol ha'eda lirgomotam ba'avanim. However, the assembly spoke of, let's pelt them with stones. Uchvod Adonai nir'a be'oel mo'ed el kol b'nei Yisrael. Meanwhile, the essence of Yud-Heh Vav-Heh became visible in the tent of meeting to all of the children of Israel.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to stop my share for a minute and say a few things, actually ask something. Ellie, do you have your hand up?
You intuited that. I was going to put my hand up. I have a question. What?
I have this superpower with me. I can see people's questions on their faces.
Not your first rodeo.
Yeah.
What's that?
Not my first rodeo, go ahead.
Yeah. What, if anything, do we know about Nun and Jephunneh?
Caleb and Yoshua. So Caleb.
No. About
Parents.
their fathers.
Yeah, I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Nothing.
Nothing.
But I will say that Caleb is from the tribe of Judah and Joshua is from the tribe of Ephraim. Thank you. I was going to say that.
And is there anything from that? Is there anything that stands out from that?
So I think the whole Judah thing is interesting because Judah was instrumental in the Joseph story.
Right.
That's number one. In terms of Ephraim, I'm not, nothing rings a bell here. What?
Yosef.
Oh, good point. Yeah, it's descended from Joseph. So we have Joseph and Judah, the victim and the Judah who, thank you, that was very helpful, Joe. We have the descendant of the victim and descendant of the guy who helps reconnect the
But
family.
also Wendy has something to say.
Yeah, but also just
Hold on.
on that, yeah. So there is something there. I mean,
Yes.
There is something
Yeah,
there
yeah.
in terms of their.
Yeah,
their
again, we're
lineage.
traveling down from Genesis 37 to here, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about that?
Oh.
Okay, Wendy, as Tony says, has her hand up, and then I want to, let me plant a question before I call Wendy. So what in this passage, and people in the room can see it in front of them, and hopefully people on Zoom have access to the source sheet through the link. Caroline, can you put the link again?
So which passage?
The passage we just read, just now. What in this passage explains why Caleb, descendant of Judah, and Joshua, descendant of Ephraim, have courage? What gives them courage? What is it? So I want to know that. Okay, and then I'm going to say a few things. Wendy.
Also, the reason why Joshua, being from the tribe of Ephraim, is significant because he's the one who leads the children of Israel into.
We can't hear Wendy.
Oh, so Wendy, come close. Thank you.
Joshua is the one who ultimately leads the children into the land, and this was preordained by Yaakov, because instead of being the Bechor to Manasseh, he gave it to Ephraim. So this was like Jacob.
So Jacob gave the status of the eldest to Ephraim.
Right. So this was not a mistake, because this is what Jacob wanted, and so, hence the reason why Joshua is the one to lead the people into
So
Israel.
destiny planted at the end of Genesis.
Correct.
Beautiful.
Correct. And also, I just wanted to ask if you would speak about the fact that the only tribe not represented in the spies is the tribe of Levi.
No.
They're too learned.
Not right now. I think it's going to derail us. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
To answer your question,
Yeah.
I think it is faith and correct.
Okay, so
It's
Sharon's
correct.
answering the question, what gives the two courage in the sense that they can, as opposed to the 10 saying we can't and we're going to be consumed?
I think it's a combination of faith in God And in fact, it's proved in this very passage, they wanted pelt, and then God comes in. So there is that faith, and you have God entering at these moments.
Show me the faith. Show me in the passage.
The faith is, God, what do they,
Im chafetz banu Adonai, right?
where's this? Have no fear,
Im
for they are.
chafetz banu Adonai in
For
verse 8.
Adonai is with us, have no fear. Of course, I think you can have, as you said last night, you can have fear and you can still have courage. And then in fact, God enters and, when they're threatening to pelt them with the stones, it's almost as though already the presence is there. And I think there's also, and, it becomes you could call it, if it's depending upon your point of view, you could call it a kind of magical thinking. But when you have the vision to reach a goal that may, on some level, feel scary or insurmountable, but if you don't think you can get there, you definitely won't get there. If you believe you can get there, and I've had this happen to me, where it's like chutzpah, love, like when I translated from Catalan, not knowing a word of Catalan, but I was determined to do this translation, I found a way to get there.
Wow.
But if you don't have that kind of vision, you'll achieve nothing.
Great. So
Can I
let me,
jump onto that?
yes.
So I'm just loving what you're saying because it flows naturally from Elizabethan tragedy and your reference to Othello, because the blessing and the curse of that play is that you kind of bring about the thing that you fear. Like Othello fears Desdemona is unfaithful. She never is, but he's so attached to that fear that in a weird way he manifests it, he makes it happen.
Right.
That's a very morally perilous truth, because it can also lead very quickly to victim blaming.
It can.
You bring about.
And yet it's too important a truth to discard,
Yeah.
despite that danger.
But precisely because the converse can also be true, that you can, nothing is but thinking makes it so, as Shakespeare said. So if you think you'll succeed, perhaps you will.
You would determine that your daughter would survive. It was so moving to hear you last night. You were determined.
Yeah, but that's dangerous. That's very dangerous.
But
Okay, I want to say a couple of things that I'll call on people. Because people die.
I understand that.
It's not in our control. Let's just be careful with that. I want to say, I think that there's something here that's completely countercultural for our culture, which is it's not about their self-confidence. It's about their trusting the larger enterprise and being part of it. And I think that's what gives them self-confidence. They're not grasshoppers because they're part of the sacred enterprise. But that's what we're doing. They have their why. Okay, I see a lot of hands. Anyone who hasn't spoken anywhere in this room? No, Tommy.
I've spoken, but just one quick thing.
Ask you a question, although I've been chattering all day. How precise is that translation of grasshopper, since we're really
So, as far as I know, so precise. I'm going to call on Jessie Klein online, who is not spoken.
No, she's just entering.
Oh, she's just entering? Oh, forget that. Okay, all right. So I'm going to ask for quick comments because I would like to do some other text. Hold on one second. Let me see where we are. Okay. All right, now,
Quick.
Popcorn?
Amy,
Done.
only 1 point to each person.
It's just the point of the 2 out of the 12 who just don't go along with the pack. You can't know why, really, while it's happening, because people are a complex mixture of who they are and where they come from and what they believe and all the factors that go into these unique entities that we are. And it's only in looking back that we can really see anything and try to glean something to be inspired by. But ultimately, I feel you can't really know.
All we have is the Torah's testimony, and all we can do is interpret it.
Yeah.
So not only can we not know, but we don't know if the story ever happened.
Yeah.
So what this is, at least as far as I'm concerned, in this room, sacred literature, the stories of our ancestors, and we're interpreting the language.
Right. And just to your point of being careful about talking about death or being careful about trying to know what causes anyone to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to say, we can totally have a mindset of we can do it, and sometimes we can't, even when we have that mindset. I just want to be really careful here. We don't bend reality, we're human beings. Maybe we do bend reality, I don't know, that's a whole other question, but I just want to say it's not ultimately in our control. Okay, Ben.
Going to say that I think I was going to sound a similar kind of cautionary note, or
Yeah.
this perilousness of interpreting this text, which is, I can see how it would lead to the idea of manifesting, just kind of saying what you said before, like
Yes, the idea of manifesting.
This idea of manifesting. So like, if pleased with us, Yud He Vav He will bring us into that land. So I think, and give it to us. And so I think that that idea right there is like, well, you know, does that mean that if we have this courage, then we will manifest this safety, because their protection has departed from them, they're toast,
They are toast.
as Usher Chaim put it so well. And so, but I think like that, this same text, right, can and has, this type of text can be interpreted in the same way against us, right? So like, if somebody else takes this text and says like, you know what, maybe Yud He Vav He is favoring us now, and we are toast, right? It doesn't feel good to be the toast. So I think if the idea that we as humans can act on this and then find out later whose side is toast by Yud He Vav He favoring that side, I think that, and the idea that we have agency in that if we can say like, hey, if we are on the side of the angels, then we will manifest the things that we desire, right? That's perilous.
Yes, I agree. I don't think victory means God is on your side.
Right.
Not in the least bit. And I want to say one more thing. The wilderness experience can be read as a kind of geography of our inner landscape and our resistance or willingness to go forward.
Amen.
It's not about a specific outcome. So in that reading, the promised land, and this is less perilous politically as well, is moving forward, you know, despite scary things, to put it very simply. Moving forward and facing all the scary things we have to,
Amen.
so that some promise is realized. Okay. Okay, Marla and Tony, and then back to the text.
What that reminds me of is when I finished my psychoanalytic program, the speaker said that the more anxiety you can tolerate, the richer your life is going to be.
Ooh, I love that. Did everyone hear that? The more anxiety you can tolerate, the richer your life is going to be. And let's just unpack that. I think that's because we're letting our internal stuckness shift, and that causes tremendous anxiety, being stabilized, right? Routine, right? Gives us like, oh my God, like I had such a day, I just want to go home. I just want to go to the familiar. Like, get me out of the unfamiliar. Get me back to Egypt. Get me back to Mitzrayim. I want something familiar. Okay, Tony, quick.
So, in fact, maybe it's all about the placebo effect, as it's called in medical language. And we're dreaming a dream together. And yet, the other side of it is the dream is dreaming us.
Ooh.
And so one of the 10 things that I'm not going to share today.
So this is our dream of our ancestors, this book. That's dreaming us.
Well, yes, this book
which
is.
goes to Amy's point before.
But this book is, but this 3D movie we're in right now is also the dream we're dreaming together. And the dream is dreaming us. And one of many, the Kevin Costner character in the beautiful movie Hidden Figures says to one of those three mathematicians, I'm already on the moon. I'm just waiting for you to, this is to Sharon's point, I'm just waiting for you to do the math to get us there. That's, and unfortunately, there's a dark side of that. an unnamed orange-haired guy, I think actually is not arguably all that trusting in the larger whole. He's trusting in, he has faith in himself, and that alone has caused some magic of his being elected and reelected, in my opinion.
So the dark forces also have some.
Yes, they're
Okay,
because
okay,
we have God
Okay,
in
go on.
us.
Yes, okay. Daniel,
Shabbat Shalom. Just a reminder to sort of reinforce what you said. Rabbi Sachs, based on the Lubavitcher Rebbe interpretation, that the problem with the 10 was not that they were afraid of defeat, but rather they were afraid of success.
that's great.
Which would imply assuming their earthly responsibilities, leaving, in some sense, that ideal situation where everything was taken care of for them. They could dedicate themselves to the spirituality of God and not have to deal with earthly affairs, as opposed to taking charge of their actually worldly
So let me give you a proof text for that, or give everybody, it was really beautiful. I think it was in last week's Parsha, where they say, if I have this right, Mi yachidlenu basar, who's going to feed us meat? Right? In the wilderness, there's still children. Right? They're given manna from above, they're given water from a well, and the promised land is going to be a whole new order of society where they are expected to be adults. Thank you. Okay. Richard, I want to get through one text and then I'll call on you, okay? All right, who can read number 8 in English? Sharon.
Read it. Okay, this is from the
This is actually right on point in terms of going forward or not. Go ahead.
From the Women's Torah Commentary, send emissaries. A hyperliteral translation of the first 3 words of this verse reads, send for yourself, men. In his 1602 commentary, the Kli Yakar claims that while the Israelite men of the wilderness generation hated the land of Israel,
They keep wanting to go back to Egypt, right?
The Israelite women loved it. His proof is based on the argument that the demand of the discontented Israelites, let us head back for Egypt, represents the feelings of all the men, while give us a holding in the land of Israel among our fathers' kinsmen, although formally attributed only to the daughters of Zelophehad.
Yeah.
Yes, actually represents the feelings of all the women. Based on these generalizations, the Kli Yakar claims that if God had chosen the scouts, God would have selected female scouts who loved the land in order to ensure positive reform. Instead, when Moses was given permission to choose the scouts for yourself, he made the tactical error of sending men instead.
That's the failure of leadership.
Beautiful. Okay, do one more because it actually relates to what we just read.
Can we read this one?
Yeah, do the next one.
Courage to create. This is from
Yes.
Romemu. We are called.
So, 20th century psychologist.
Yes. We are called upon to do something new.
This relates to Marla's anxiety.
To confront a no man's land, to push, or no man's land.
Exactly.
To push into a forest where there are no well-worn paths and from which no one has returned to guide us. This is what existentialists call the anxiety of nothingness. To live into the future means to leap into the unknown. And this requires a degree of courage for which there is no immediate precedent and which few people realize. If you do not express your own original ideas, if you do not listen to your own being, you will have betrayed yourself. Also, you will have betrayed our community in failing to make your contribution to the whole.
So let's recap for a minute the elements of courage. The elements of courage seem to be understanding yourself as part of a greater whole, having a mission or a project, and being willing to be anxious. Right? That's what I got so far.
Sweet.
Sweet. Okay, Richard and Gloria.
Yes, Rabbi Diane. Nachmanides has an interesting comment focusing on the verb with the word diba. He
I'm
says
sorry,
that
who has an interesting comment?
Nachmanides,
Not, thank you, okay.
Rambam,
Rambam, go
Rambam.
ahead.
He says that the person that bringeth forth diba, which is the verb, I think, vayitziu, is a fool who speaks falsely, but one who tells a truthful bad report like Joseph is one who brings diba. I think that's vaya they diba. Um, and he also points to another use of the word diba at Numbers 14, 37, where he
Yeah,
said,
that's in the story that we already looked at, yes.
yeah. So he thinks that depending on which verb is used, you can tell if it's a intentional bad report or a truthful report of bad conduct. He makes that. I don't know how he can make that based on the verb, but that's what he says.
Interesting, thank you, Richard. Okay, Gloria.
Good morning, good Shabbos, everyone. It just occurs to me that since the result of this is that this group of people is not allowed, and this reverts to your sermon last night, is not allowed to go into the promised land, but their children, and that's our job to do it for the children.
Beautiful, thank you, Gloria. Okay, we're gonna jump into what I call the antidote to grasshopper consciousness, because I'm sure we all have it, right? We all feel like grasshoppers at times, or maybe all the time. And we think that's how other people look at us. And so here we go. Asher Chaim, can you read number 10?
Daber el bnei
This is from the
Yisrael,
Shema. This is from the Shema.
God having told the children of Moshe, speak to the children of Israel, v'amarta alehem, speak and say to them, v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei vigdehem ledorotam. They shall put tzitzit tassels on the corners of their garments for generations. V'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf p'til tchelet, and place on the tassel of the fringe a thread of royal blue. V'hayalachem letzitzit, it shall be for you, tzitzit, tassels, uritemoto, you shall see them, uzachartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, and you shall remember all of the commandments of Yud He Vav He v'asitemotam, and perform them. V'lo taturu, and you shall not go scouting around. Acharei levavchem
Same word from the story of the scouts, right?
following after your heart, minds, and your eyes, asher atem zonim acharehem, that you stray based on them.
So this is, let's just stop here for a minute, Asher Chaim. This is really interesting. Like everything in our culture says, oh, go after your own heart. What does your heart say? Here's is like, don't go after your heart and mind. What's up with that? Right? So I think it gets to what we were talking about before, that our own hearts and minds are limited, and we need something to remind us that there's a bigger plan. What does it say in Shakespeare?
Oh.
Which line?
About plans of human beings or devising of human beings.
Oh, things exist beyond
There's
your
more-
philosophy. There's more under heaven.
There's more under heaven and earth than
exists in your philosophy.
exists in your philosophy. Exactly. So that's what this is about. And the tassels, the fringes, the tzitzit, are there to remind us there's more. Sweet. Okay, go on.
If I may, who are you going to believe?
may.
You or your own lying eyes. The question is, what are you focusing your eyes on? And if you're focusing your eyes on the wrong stuff rather than on the tzitzit, you're going to stray. Lema'an tizkeru, so that you may remember, v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, and perform all of my mitzvot, v'hitem kedoshim le'elohechem, and you shall be holy, set apart to your God. Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hoseiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem le'elohim. I am Yud He Vav He, your God, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim in order to be your God. Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am Yud He Vav He, your God.
So we end this passage here with this I statement from God, but a profoundly relational statement, right? So the tzitzit, right? I, who took you out of the land of Egypt to be a God to you. I am Adonai, your God. So these tassels are supposed to remind us who we belong to, right? Not to those people who are judging us in the corner, but something much bigger than that. Okay, we're going to do one more passage, and hopefully, David, there'll be a minute to call on you. Oh, God, that's loud. Who has a big voice in the room that can read? Okay, I do. This Petiot Techelet, this like little blue string on our talitot, right? One of the fringes is blue. Blue like the heavens represents our divine essence. The seed of the divine that was planted inside us. We are made up of many strands and threads, but our essence is this one central Petiot Techelet, the single blue thread of the tzitzit. This divine essence. When we lose ourselves in comparison and ambition, what we are forgetting is that there can be no comparisons among divine essences. That's interesting. We each have this Petiot Techelet, this blue thread deep inside us. When we remember it and return to it, we remember our true value, our true light, not earned, but always already there. Maybe you can feel the tug of the divine thread of blue inside you, like a cord of connection, pulling you into alignment with the blue heavens above and with the divine inside yourself, your own true blue essence. From this place, comparisons with others make no sense. The world's ladders of silver and gold are mirage, not ultimate reality. We are all sitting on the ground together, each with our own blue thread. I see a field of bright colored flowers, and your flower and my flower are blooming among them. They each stand tall. Plenty of room for each one to shine. They cannot be compared. They're each simply stunning. Lo taturu, right? That's the verb again for scouting. Don't compare. Know your own value. You are neither a grasshopper nor a giant. We're each a whole world unto ourselves. Okay, I see Dave.